Hello, tonight you travel to a world that exists long before crowns, armies, and shining palaces. You follow rivers that seem almost endless, winding through silent landscapes where the first foundations of civilization are only beginning to take shape. Somewhere in the darkness of distant ages, great empires are still asleep beneath layers of soil, waiting for their time to arrive. You stand beside a broad river delta as dawn slowly spreads across the horizon. The air feels cool and gentle, carrying the scent of damp earth and growing reeds. Thousands of years pass almost unnoticed in this landscape, and each season quietly leaves behind another thin layer of fertile soil, like pages being added to a book that nobody has yet learned to read. Across distant regions, similar scenes unfold beside the Nile, the Indus, the Yellow River, and countless waterways whose names have long been forgotten. Water moves steadily through valleys and floodplains, shaping the land grain by grain. If nature had an office job, these rivers would probably be the most reliable employees, showing up every year without missing a single shift. So, before you get completely comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel. But only if you truly enjoy what we're creating here. And while you settle in, feel free to share your location and local time in the comments below. It is always fascinating to see where in the world this quiet journey finds you tonight. Now, slowly dim the lights. Perhaps turn on a fan, letting the steady hum of the air fill the room. And in that gentle rhythm, we quietly step into tonight's journey together. You begin by observing the land itself. Long before the first cities appear on the horizon, geological forces work patiently beneath the surface of the earth. Mountains gradually wear down under countless seasons of wind and rain. Tiny fragments of rock are carried away by streams and rivers, eventually settling across broad plains where future generations will one day cultivate crops. The transformation is so slow that it resembles a clock advancing only once every 100 years. The ancient world feels remarkably different from the modern landscape you know today. There are no highways crossing deserts, no engines echoing through valleys, and no machines carving paths through hillsides. Instead, forests spread across vast territories. Grasslands ripple beneath seasonal winds, and wetlands shelter birds, fish, and countless other forms of life. Every landscape seems to breathe according to rhythms so old that they feel almost beyond the reach of memory itself. Metal exists, of course, hidden within veins of ore beneath mountains and hills. Yet in many regions, it remains unknown or rarely used. Communities rely on materials gathered directly from their surroundings. Stone becomes a cutting tool, bone becomes a needle. Wood becomes a handle, a shelter frame, or a simple farming implement. Necessity quietly teaches creativity. Archaeological evidence reveals that many early societies thrive without extensive metal technology. Excavations across different continents show carefully crafted stone blades, polished axes, woven baskets, and sophisticated pottery. Looking at these discoveries today can feel surprisingly familiar. Human beings have always enjoyed finding clever solutions, even when the nearest hardware store is several thousand years away. As centuries pass, river ecosystems become increasingly important. Seasonal floods enrich the soil with nutrients carried from distant highlands. Fish gather in shallow waters. Migratory birds follow ancient routes across the sky. Wild plants flourish along riverbanks. These environments offer remarkable stability, encouraging small groups to settle permanently, build shelters, raise families, and develop stronger community bonds. The Nile provides one remarkable example. Each year, before modern dams alter its flow, floodwaters spread across surrounding lands and leave behind dark, fertile sediment. This annual cycle becomes one of nature's most dependable gifts. Long before pharaohs rise to prominence, the river quietly prepares the stage upon which future civilizations will perform. Far to the east, the Yellow River carries vast quantities of loess, a fine wind-blown sediment that gives the water its distinctive golden color. Over centuries, this drifting soil settles across the landscape, creating fertile ground for cultivation while also reshaping riverbanks and floodplains. Life beside such a river demands patience, careful observation, and a deep understanding of nature's ever-changing rhythms. Meanwhile, the Indus River system nourishes immense stretches of land across South Asia. Seasonal monsoon rains and snowmelt flowing from distant mountain ranges feed waterways that sustain growing communities year after year. People gradually learn where crops thrive best, when harvests should begin, and how resources can be stored for difficult seasons. Their knowledge accumulates quietly through generations of shared experience. Many researchers describe this era as a long and patient conversation between human communities and the environment surrounding them. Rather than attempting to dominate nature, people adapt thoughtfully to shifting conditions. They observe migrating birds, watch changing river levels, and remember patterns in rainfall and weather. Their survival depends less on control and more on careful attention to the natural world. One particularly fascinating example emerges in the settlement of Çatalhöyük, located in present-day Turkey. Beginning around 7500 BCE, this large Neolithic community flourishes thousands of years before many famous metalworking civilizations. Archaeologists uncovered densely packed homes, wall paintings, and evidence of organized social life. The settlement demonstrates that complex communities can emerge long before bronze weapons or iron tools become widespread. Walking through an imagined version of Çatalhöyük, you notice rooftops functioning as pathways between homes. Entrances often sit above rather than at street level. Daily life unfolds within a carefully arranged environment built largely from mud brick and local materials. The design feels practical, creative, and quietly innovative, almost like a neighborhood developed by people who genuinely dislike traffic. What becomes increasingly clear is that human cooperation begins long before powerful empires dominate historical records. Communities organize labor, share knowledge, construct dwellings, and manage resources using tools fashioned from stone, wood, bone, and determination. The foundations of civilization are already present, even if later generations rarely receive the credit they deserve. As evening settles across these ancient landscapes, rivers continue their endless work. Water glides through reeds, reflects fading sunlight, and carries fine sediment toward distant deltas. The land remains patient. The sky slowly darkens. Somewhere beyond the horizon, future villages and cities wait quietly within the possibilities of tomorrow. And so you remain beside the flowing water as the last colors of sunset stretch across the plain. The river neither rushes nor hesitates. It simply moves forward, season after season, century after century. In its calm passage lies the beginning of a larger story, one that will soon lead toward growing settlements, shared harvests, and the first enduring communities of the ancient world. You remain near the rivers as another stretch of time quietly unfolds. The water continues its patient journey across broad plains, but now something subtle begins to change. Small groups of people who once followed seasonal movements start spending longer periods in particular places. The valleys feel welcoming, generous, and steady, like an old friend who always remembers where you left your favorite chair. Morning sunlight drifts across fertile ground that has been enriched by countless floods. Thin layers of silt cover the earth, creating fields capable of supporting more life than before. Here, among reeds and grasses, people begin experimenting with seeds. They scatter grains into soft soil and wait, observing the results with the same careful curiosity that modern people sometimes reserve for checking weather apps. At first, farming develops gradually rather than suddenly. Wild cereals already grow in many regions, and generations of observation reveal which plants produce the most useful harvests. Over time, people learn that certain seeds return reliably when planted near water sources. This knowledge spreads quietly through families and neighboring communities, becoming part of daily life. The rhythm of agriculture gradually becomes the rhythm by which entire communities measure the passage of time. Rain falls, rivers swell beyond their banks, seeds take root, crops mature beneath the sun, and harvests fill communal storage areas. Then the cycle begins once more. Season after season, the pattern repeats with remarkable reliability, creating a natural calendar that guides daily life. The land itself becomes a patient teacher, offering wisdom through repetition rather than words. You can almost hear the gentle ticking of this ancient clock as the seasons unfold. Instead of gears, springs, or mechanical hands, it moves according to sunlight, rainfall, fertile soil, and changing temperatures. Each season brings familiar responsibilities. People prepare fields, repair homes, gather food, and care for livestock. The pace feels steady, predictable, and reassuring, standing in quiet contrast to the hurried schedules and constant demands that often shape modern life. As harvests become more dependable, people face a new opportunity. For the first time, substantial amounts of food can be stored for future use. Large baskets, clay containers, and communal storage spaces begin appearing within settlements. Archaeologists have discovered many such facilities, revealing how important planning becomes once communities start thinking months or even years ahead. The simple act of storing grain changes everything. Food reserves provide protection during poor seasons and allow populations to grow gradually. A village that once depended entirely upon immediate resources can now prepare for uncertainty. It is not complete security, of course, but it offers a comforting sense of stability, rather like keeping an extra blanket nearby during winter. Around these storage areas, settlements slowly expand. Houses constructed from mud brick, packed earth, timber, and reeds appear in clusters. Builders use materials gathered directly from nearby landscapes. Walls rise from river clay. Roofs rely upon wooden beams and woven plant fibers. Every structure reflects an intimate relationship with local environments. Many of these early buildings survive surprisingly well in the archaeological record. Their remains reveal thoughtful planning and practical engineering. Thick walls help regulate temperature, keeping interiors cooler during hot days and warmer during cool nights. Long before modern climate control systems, people discover ways to work with nature rather than against it. One of the most fascinating truths about the ancient world is that impressive construction often occurs without widespread metal tools. Entire communities cooperate to move earth, shape bricks, gather timber, and erect substantial buildings. Organization becomes just as important as technology. Human coordination proves capable of accomplishing remarkable tasks even when resources appear limited. In several early societies, large ceremonial structures begin to emerge through remarkable collective effort and careful planning. Workers transport stone, timber, and other materials across considerable distances using sledges, ropes, and coordinated labor systems. The accomplishment becomes even more impressive when you remember that communication relies entirely on face-to-face interaction. Nobody can simply send a group message reminding hundreds of workers to gather together at sunrise. As villages continue expanding, the surrounding landscape gradually changes alongside them. Footpaths form naturally between homes, storage areas, and cultivated fields. In some regions, irrigation channels appear, guiding precious water toward growing crops. Small enclosures provide shelter for domesticated animals. What was once largely untouched terrain slowly transforms into a lived-in environment, shaped by countless practical decisions repeated and refined across many generations. The seasons continue guiding these developments. During rainy periods, rivers replenish the land. During drier months, communities focus on maintenance, storage, and preparation. Life follows cycles that remain visible to everyone. Unlike many modern systems hidden behind technology, the mechanisms supporting survival are easy to observe simply by looking across the valley. Children grow up learning these patterns from parents and grandparents. Knowledge passes through stories, demonstrations, and daily participation. There are no formal textbooks waiting on shelves, yet education remains constant. Every planting season becomes a lesson. Every harvest becomes a practical examination. Every successful year adds another chapter to a growing reservoir of collective memory. Archaeological evidence suggests that many early farming communities maintained social systems far more organized than once believed. Daily responsibilities were carefully divided among members. Resources were stored and distributed according to shared needs, and disagreements were likely settled through established customs and traditions. As populations gradually increased, cooperation became increasingly important. The larger a settlement grew, the more valuable trust, communication, and collective understanding became for maintaining stability. You begin to notice subtle signs of administration slowly emerging within these growing communities. Certain individuals may supervise communal storage buildings where harvests are preserved for future seasons. Others help coordinate construction projects, irrigation maintenance, or seasonal agricultural work. These responsibilities appear gradually rather than through sudden change. They develop naturally because larger populations require greater coordination. Much like an orchestra eventually benefits from the steady guidance of a conductor. At the same time, exchanges between neighboring settlements become increasingly common across valleys and river plains. Communities trade resources, share practical knowledge, and introduce new ideas to one another. A farming technique developed in one region may quietly appear elsewhere several generations later. New crops, tools, artistic styles, and customs spread along informal networks of contact, creating connections that gradually extend far beyond the boundaries of any single village. As evening settles once more across the fertile valleys, smoke rises gently from hearths and cooking fires. The fields stand quietly beneath fading sunlight, while storage houses hold the promise of future seasons. Villages continue growing, families continue cooperating, and populations continue expanding. In this calm and steady world, the need for more organized systems of management slowly begins to emerge, preparing the way for the next stage of humanity's long and patient journey. You awaken gently into another stretch of ancient time, though the people around you have never truly gone to sleep. Their days follow patterns so familiar and dependable that one season seems to flow effortlessly into the next. The villages beside rivers and fertile valleys have grown larger now, not through sudden change, but through centuries of quiet repetition and shared routines. As morning light spreads across the landscape, farmers leave their homes and walk toward nearby fields. They carry simple tools made from wood, stone, and bone. The work ahead is neither hurried nor dramatic. It is simply part of life. Seeds are planted, weeds are removed, and irrigation channels are checked with patient attention learned over many generations. The fields themselves appear almost like living calendars. Different crops occupy different stages of growth, creating subtle variations of color across the landscape. Some plants are newly sprouting, while others bend beneath the weight of ripening grain. The earth offers constant reminders that time moves in cycles rather than straight lines. Not far away, another group begins a different kind of work. Skilled weavers sit beneath shaded structures, carefully transforming plant fibers into thread and cloth. Their fingers move with practiced precision. The motion seems simple, yet each pattern carries knowledge accumulated through centuries. Watching them feels a little like observing someone solve a puzzle they already know by heart. Nearby, potters shape damp clay gathered from riverbanks. Their hands guide the material into bowls, jars, and storage vessels. Some pieces will hold grain, others will carry water or preserve food through changing seasons. Archaeologists often discover these objects thousands of years later, preserving quiet traces of ordinary lives that would otherwise be forgotten. In these communities, essential skills are often learned through careful observation rather than formal teaching. Children watch their parents, elders, and neighbors as they work each day. Over time, they naturally absorb techniques and traditions until these abilities become familiar parts of life. Learning quietly continues through ordinary activities, woven into daily routines like threads within a cloth. Equally important are the storytellers. In societies where writing has not yet become widespread, memory serves as a living archive. Certain individuals become keepers of traditions, histories, seasonal knowledge, and community values. Their words connect the present to the past. Every story functions as both entertainment and education, preserving information that future generations will need. As settlements continue expanding, archaeological discoveries reveal growing levels of social organization and planning. Excavations uncover clusters of homes arranged around shared open spaces where daily activities likely take place. Pathways connect different parts of the community, creating a network of movement throughout the settlement. Nearby storage facilities help preserve important resources. By studying these layouts today, researchers can reconstruct surprisingly detailed insights into how people lived, worked, and interacted. The storage buildings are especially valuable sources of information for archaeologists. Maintaining large quantities of grain requires careful planning and management throughout the year. Harvests must be kept dry, protected from insects and animals, and preserved for future use during less productive seasons. The existence of communal storage suggests cooperation, trust, and long-term thinking. These communities are not temporary encampments, but stable settlements actively preparing for the challenges of the future. Narrow paths wind gently between homes, workshops, storage areas, and communal gathering spaces. Although these routes may appear simple at first glance, they reveal important details about everyday life. Over many decades and even centuries, repeated movement creates recognizable patterns within the settlement. People follow familiar routes to fields, water sources, and work areas. Through constant use, ordinary daily habits leave lasting impressions upon the landscape itself. What emerges from the archaeological record is a picture of remarkable stability. Many communities maintain similar lifestyles for generations. Buildings are repaired rather than abandoned. Agricultural systems continue functioning. Families remain connected to familiar land. Change certainly occurs, but it often unfolds slowly enough to be almost invisible within a single lifetime. One fascinating example of this stability appears far from the great river valleys often discussed in history books. Along the coast of present-day Peru, the civilization known as Corral develops large, ceremonial centers and substantial population hubs. Beginning around 3000 BCE, its achievements challenge many assumptions about how complex societies emerge. People of Corral construct remarkable monumental architecture, including large platform mounds, ceremonial complexes, and carefully designed sunken circular plazas. Archaeological evidence indicates that these impressive structures are created with little reliance on metal technology. Instead, their success depends upon social organization, coordinated labor, agricultural productivity, and a shared sense of purpose. The achievements of Corral demonstrate how cooperation alone can support ambitious building projects on a truly impressive scale. What makes Corral particularly fascinating is the relatively peaceful character suggested by much of the archaeological record. Compared with many later civilizations, researchers have discovered limited evidence of large-scale warfare or extensive military activity. Although many details remain uncertain, the settlement illustrates how social complexity can emerge through agriculture, trade, ceremonial traditions, and collective cooperation. Its history offers a quieter model of development than the conflicts often emphasized in historical narratives. Back across the wider ancient world, similar daily patterns continue unfolding with reassuring regularity. Farmers tend their crops and gather harvests according to the seasons. Potters shape and fire clay vessels for storage and cooking. Weavers create textiles from available fibers, while builders maintain homes, walls, and public structures. Storytellers pass knowledge from one generation to the next beneath evening skies. Together, these familiar activities create a stable rhythm supporting growing populations. Even healthcare begins to take shape in simple yet meaningful ways within many early communities. Knowledge of medicinal plants gradually accumulates through careful observation, experimentation, and shared experience. Certain herbs are used to ease discomfort, support healing, or relieve common ailments. Although these societies possess nothing resembling modern medicine, they develop practical forms of care rooted in centuries of accumulated wisdom and close attention to the natural world around them. As dusk settles gently across the settlement, cooking fires begin glowing between clusters of homes. The sounds of labor slowly fade as families return from fields, workshops, and storage areas. People gather to share meals prepared from harvested grain, vegetables, fish, and other local resources. Thin streams of smoke rise into the cooling evening air. The village feels calm and secure, held together by routines and traditions practiced across countless generations. Night arrives slowly across the valley. Children listen as elders recount stories of rivers, seasons, ancestors, and distant places. The flames flicker against mud brick walls, while familiar voices rise and fall in steady rhythms. Around these quiet fires, generations sit together beneath the stars, sharing memories of the land and preserving them for those who will one day inherit the same ancient paths. You remain beside the gentle warmth of fading fires as another quiet chapter of human history slowly takes shape. The villages that once appeared large and impressive begin transforming into something more complex. Across many generations, populations increase, cultivated lands expand, and cooperation becomes essential. Without sudden changes or dramatic moments, certain settlements gradually evolve into the earliest forms of true urban centers. Morning arrives softly over wide floodplains and fertile valleys, revealing these early cities from above. They appear less like symbols of power and more like carefully balanced living systems. Homes gather near storage areas, workshops occupy familiar spaces, and irrigation channels stretch toward distant fields. Every part works together, creating a stable environment where thousands of people can share resources and live peacefully. Unlike many later empires remembered mainly through conquest and warfare, these early urban societies often build their influence through administration, cooperation, and careful planning. Their strength does not come from enormous armies, but from managing resources wisely. Grain must be collected and stored, water must reach fields, and labor must be coordinated. Stability grows quietly from organized systems rather than dramatic displays of power. You can see this clearly in the large granaries that appear within some ancient settlements. These spacious storage buildings protect harvests gathered from nearby farmland and preserve supplies for future needs. They represent both security and abundance. During years of successful harvests, reserves slowly increase. When seasons become difficult, these stored resources help communities continue functioning with greater confidence and less disruption. The grain itself becomes a quiet foundation of society, almost like an early form of shared value. It provides food for workers, supports families, and allows specialists to spend time on activities beyond farming. Potters, builders, weavers, traders, and administrators all depend on reliable supplies. In many ways, these simple collections of grain achieve remarkable results by sustaining communities more effectively than force alone. Nearby, irrigation systems continue expanding as communities learn to guide water across cultivated fields with increasing accuracy. Channels carry streams toward crops, while small embankments help regulate the movement of water during different seasons. People work together to repair and maintain these networks because everyone depends upon their success. Water management becomes one of the greatest achievements of early urban societies, supporting the lives of entire populations. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of extensive irrigation infrastructure across several ancient regions. These systems often require many generations of maintenance, adjustment, and improvement. Every repaired canal, strengthened barrier, and restored waterway represents cooperation among countless individuals. Looking at these remains today feels similar to discovering a massive community project that continued functioning through centuries of patience, organization, and shared responsibility. Large earthen walls also begin appearing around certain settlements as communities become larger and more complex. Modern observers may assume these structures exist only for protection, but many serve several practical purposes. They help control flooding, mark settlement boundaries, and organize expanding urban areas. Built from packed earth and mud brick, these walls slowly rise through repeated efforts rather than sudden or dramatic construction. The materials used in these early cities remain surprisingly simple and accessible. Earth, clay, timber, reeds, and stone form the foundation of many impressive structures. In numerous regions, metal tools remain limited or uncommon during these periods. Yet remarkable buildings still emerge, showing that human creativity and cooperation can create advanced societies even without depending heavily on sophisticated metallurgy. One of the most fascinating examples emerges within the Indus Valley civilization, where cities such as Mohenjo-daro and Harappa develop advanced urban systems during the 3rd millennium BCE. Their streets follow carefully planned patterns. Residential areas are arranged with purpose, and public facilities reveal an impressive level of organization. These cities demonstrate how early societies achieved coordination without relying on extensive metal technology. Perhaps the most remarkable achievement of some Indus cities is their advanced drainage system and careful urban planning. Archaeological excavations reveal covered drains, brick-lined channels, and organized methods for managing wastewater throughout the settlements. In certain ways, these systems appear more sophisticated than those developed in some much later cities. It remains one of history's quiet engineering accomplishments, created without modern machines or widespread use of iron technology. Walking through an imagined street of Mohenjo-daro, you notice how practical and thoughtful the environment appears. Water moves through planned pathways, buildings follow organized layouts, and public areas blend naturally with private spaces. The city reflects a society that values structure and cleanliness. It almost feels like an ancient version of a carefully arranged neighborhood where everyone knows exactly where things belong. As urban centers continue expanding, trade becomes an increasingly important part of everyday life. No single settlement contains every resource required for growth and stability. Some regions provide valuable stone, while others offer timber, salt, shells, or fertile agricultural products. Slowly, exchange networks connect distant communities across wide landscapes, allowing goods to travel steadily between places separated by great distances. Merchants move along rivers, across open plains, and through mountain passages that connect different regions. Their journeys may last for many weeks or even months, yet these routes gradually become dependable pathways for materials and knowledge. Alongside physical goods, travelers carry farming methods, artistic ideas, construction techniques, and cultural traditions. Trade quietly allows innovation to spread far beyond its original homeland. Archaeological discoveries reveal extensive exchange networks linking communities separated by hundreds or even thousands of miles. Beads created in one region appear in distant settlements, while rare materials travel through long chains of interaction. These discoveries show that early urban societies are not isolated worlds. They participate in broad systems of communication, exchange, and cooperation that reach surprisingly far. The expansion of trade also encourages the development of new administrative roles within growing communities. Someone needs to organize storage, coordinate labor, maintain important structures, and support the movement of goods. Leadership gradually becomes connected with planning and cooperation rather than only physical strength. Societies begin valuing individuals who can manage complexity, preserve balance, and help growing populations remain stable. As years slowly pass, isolated settlements begin to connect with one another through expanding networks of exchange. Trade paths stretch farther across valleys, rivers, and open landscapes. Information travels alongside materials, allowing ideas and techniques to move between distant communities. Villages that once interacted only with nearby neighbors gradually become part of larger regional systems shaped by countless peaceful exchanges over many generations. When evening returns, the city settles into familiar and comforting rhythms. Water continues flowing gently through carefully built channels, while granaries remain quiet beneath the fading sunlight. Merchants rest after journeys across distant lands, and families gather inside homes made from earth and timber. Beyond the settlement, roads disappear into the horizon, carrying future connections that will slowly unite separate communities. You watch the last lights of the city fade into the distance as the ancient roads continue beyond the horizon. These pathways are not roads in the modern sense. They are worn tracks across grasslands, riverbanks, deserts, and coastal shores, yet they carry something powerful. They carry connection. Across vast landscapes, people begin moving not because history commands them to, but because curiosity, necessity, and opportunity quietly invite them forward. The ancient world remains vast and mysterious for those who travel across its landscapes. Mountains rise in places where no maps exist, rivers wind through unfamiliar valleys, and deserts extend endlessly beyond the horizon. Yet people continue moving forward. Slowly, step by step, generations create pathways that connect communities once separated by enormous distances. Along these routes travel goods that are both ordinary and valuable. A sack of grain leaves a fertile valley, while dried fish arrives from a distant coastline. Timber gathered from forests moves toward areas where trees are limited. Each exchange reveals something about geography. Nature distributes resources unevenly, and people respond by creating relationships across different lands. Salt becomes one of the most important resources moving between ancient communities. Essential for preserving food and supporting everyday life, it is needed across many regions. Some settlements possess large natural supplies, while others have almost none. This simple mineral travels across great distances, carried by traders whose journeys gradually become familiar parts of the landscape. You can imagine a caravan moving slowly across open terrain. The pace is unhurried. Animals carry loads while travelers follow routes learned from those who came before. The journey requires patience. There are no shortcuts, no navigation satellites, and certainly no customer reviews warning about difficult sections of the trail ahead. Near coastlines, another network develops. Boats crafted from reeds, wood, and other local materials move along sheltered waters. Coastal communities exchange goods with neighboring settlements. Islands become stepping stones within larger systems of communication. The sea, often seen as a barrier, quietly becomes a bridge. Rivers continue acting as some of humanity's most reliable pathways through ancient landscapes. Before paved roads or complex transportation systems exist, waterways allow people to move goods more easily than many land routes. Canoes, rafts, and simple boats travel with currents or gentle human effort. The same rivers that nourish agriculture also become quiet channels supporting trade and communication. As these networks gradually expand, communities begin discovering unfamiliar materials from distant regions. Some objects appear rare, beautiful, or useful enough to inspire long journeys. Decorative shells move far inland, unusual stones travel between settlements, and valuable pigments reach new locations. What begins as occasional exchanges slowly develops into organized trade networks connecting different environments and cultures. One fascinating example involves obsidian, a volcanic glass valued for its sharp edges and unique appearance. Long before metal tools become widespread, obsidian becomes an important material for practical tools and ceremonial objects. Archaeological discoveries show that this dark volcanic stone travels remarkable distances through ancient exchange routes. Its movement reveals how connected early communities become through trade and cooperation. Researchers have traced obsidian artifacts back to specific volcanic sources, sometimes hundreds of miles from the locations where they are discovered. This finding demonstrates the existence of surprisingly extensive exchange systems during very early periods of human history. Communities separated by great distances remain connected through chains of trade and interaction. The movement of obsidian reveals an important lesson about the ancient world. Progress does not always require creating completely new inventions. Sometimes advancement comes from access and connection. A village far from volcanic regions can still use valuable obsidian tools when dependable trade routes exist. Networks between communities become a powerful form of technology, allowing knowledge and resources to travel across great distances. As trade networks become stronger, knowledge begins traveling together with physical goods across ancient landscapes. Farmers discover new crops and agricultural methods from distant regions. Builders observe unfamiliar techniques and adapt them to local needs. Artisans encounter different patterns, materials, and styles through contact with travelers. This exchange happens quietly through conversations, demonstrations, and shared experiences, spreading naturally without a single person controlling the entire process. Some settlements occupy especially valuable positions along these expanding routes. A village near a river crossing, mountain passage, or coastal harbor gradually attracts more visitors from distant regions. Traders pause to rest, exchange goods, and collect information from local communities. Over time, these strategic locations become increasingly prosperous. Geography quietly influences human opportunities, shaping which places grow into important centers of connection and activity. These developing centers often create markets where products from many different environments appear together. Grain from fertile valleys may be exchanged beside shells collected from distant coastlines. Timber from forest regions may sit near carefully crafted stone tools and decorative objects. The variety of goods reflects the growing reach of human interaction, showing how separate landscapes become connected through steady exchange and cooperation. Archaeologists often uncover evidence of these ancient relationships through artifacts discovered far from their original locations. A bead created in one region may appear hundreds of miles away. A rare stone or carefully crafted object may be found where local resources do not naturally exist. These discoveries reveal that early communities were connected through surprisingly extensive networks of travel, trade, and cultural exchange. The movement of people becomes just as meaningful as the movement of materials across these landscapes. Travelers carry stories, traditions, songs, beliefs, and practical knowledge between distant communities. A merchant who spends years moving along trade routes becomes a living connection between different cultures. In this way, ancient pathways serve not only economic purposes, but also create bridges of understanding between diverse groups. Over many generations, these pathways become more familiar, trusted, and reliable. Communities begin expecting regular exchanges and recognize the rhythms of seasonal movement. Some routes become known for safety and opportunity, while others remain challenging because of harsh terrain. Slowly, the network expands like hidden roots beneath an ancient forest, unseen from above, yet becoming essential to the growth of human civilization. New forms of leadership also begin emerging around these connections. Individuals who can organize trade, manage resources, and maintain relationships gain influence within their communities. Power slowly shifts toward places capable of coordinating exchange. The map of the ancient world starts changing, not through dramatic conquest, but through the quiet accumulation of connections. As twilight settles across deserts, coastlines, riverbanks, and distant valleys, countless travelers continue moving along familiar routes. Their footsteps leave few traces visible from afar, yet their journeys reshape the world. Goods change hands, ideas find new homes, communities grow closer, and across these silent landscapes, the foundations of future centers of power begin to take shape beneath the steady rhythm of human movement. You continue along the ancient pathways, but your attention slowly turns toward the rivers themselves. These waterways that once supported farming and trade become something greater. They transform into channels of influence, carrying people, resources, knowledge, and possibilities across great distances. Regions that once felt separate gradually become connected through the quiet movement of water and the steady exchange of human experience. Across much of the ancient world, rivers quietly guide the course of human history and settlement patterns. A community located beside an important waterway often gains advantages that inland groups cannot easily access. Boats carry heavier goods than travelers can move by foot, while messages and resources travel more smoothly. The river becomes both a source of life and a natural pathway, connecting distant communities through steady movement. The same idea extends naturally to coastlines, where rivers eventually merge with the open sea and create new opportunities. Bays, estuaries, and sheltered shores become peaceful gathering points for human activity. Communities establish seasonal camps, exchange areas, and permanent settlements near these locations. Once again, geography quietly influences human choices, guiding movement and connection through the landscapes that surround them. You can imagine standing beside a quiet shoreline at the first light of morning. Small vessels rest gently on the water, shaped from materials collected nearby. Some boats are created from carefully bundled reeds, while others use carved wood, woven fibers, or combinations of natural resources. Their designs may appear simple, yet their purpose is incredibly important for connecting distant communities. A reed boat moving slowly across calm waters represents much more than simple transportation. It represents opportunity, connection, and access to distant places. It allows people to cross spaces that would otherwise require difficult journeys across land. Entire regions become closer together because skilled builders understand how to transform local materials into dependable vessels capable of carrying people and essential goods. Archaeological discoveries suggest that maritime activity develops surprisingly early in many parts of the world. Long before large metal ships dominate oceans, communities experiment with navigation, fishing, and coastal travel. Small boats venture farther from shore. River travelers explore unfamiliar waterways. Human curiosity steadily expands the boundaries of the known world. The boats themselves vary greatly depending on the landscapes where communities live. In marshlands, people use abundant reeds to create lightweight vessels suited for calm waters. In forest regions, timber becomes the preferred material for stronger boats. Coastal societies adapt their designs to changing waves and conditions, creating vessels that carry passengers, supplies, and trade goods. Necessity continues encouraging creativity without requiring advanced technology. As journeys across waterways become more reliable, influence begins traveling along these natural routes. A successful settlement upstream may share farming methods with nearby communities. Coastal traders introduce unfamiliar materials, customs, and ideas from distant places. Religious beliefs, artistic traditions, and practical knowledge move quietly beside cargo. Rivers and seas become pathways that carry culture as effectively as they transport goods. The movement of ideas often appears slow when viewed within a single lifetime. However, across many centuries, the results become remarkable. Communities that once developed separately gradually begin sharing similar features and traditions. Construction techniques appear in distant regions. Decorative patterns spread across wide areas, and cultural connections strengthen. Human networks continue expanding with every successful voyage and exchange. One fascinating discovery from researchers involves the communication networks created by ancient maritime societies. Evidence suggests that many coastal communities maintained extensive connections long before metal technology became fully developed. Simple boats, natural harbors, and accumulated navigation knowledge allowed people to exchange information across surprisingly large distances. These networks reveal a level of cooperation that was once underestimated. In some regions, archaeologists discover shells, pottery designs, and specialized materials far from their original sources. These findings suggest repeated contact between distant populations through maritime routes and coastal exchanges. Although the exact details of every interaction remain unknown, the broader pattern is clear. Ancient maritime societies often created complex networks that connected communities more widely than earlier researchers expected. Imagine a trader sailing slowly along a familiar coastline, guided by experience rather than detailed maps. Rocky cliffs, river mouths, and distant hills become natural signs along the journey. Each voyage adds new knowledge to memory. Observation itself becomes a form of navigation technology, proving that human understanding can become as valuable as any physical instrument carried aboard. The sea teaches travelers the importance of patience and careful attention. Sailors must respect changing weather, ocean currents, and seasonal patterns that influence every journey. Success comes not from controlling nature, but from working with its movements. Ancient sailors learned to observe the environment closely, just as farmers understand the quiet rhythms of fields, rivers, and changing seasons. Meanwhile, inland waterways continue supporting larger regional networks of exchange. Some rivers become essential pathways connecting multiple settlements across wide landscapes. Goods travel in both directions along these routes. Extra food supplies move toward growing population centers, while specialized products return in exchange. These connections gradually create stronger relationships and increasing dependence between communities. As these trade routes become more established, certain settlements slowly gain greater importance. Places near river crossings, natural harbors, or major junctions attract more travelers and resources. Their populations expand and their infrastructure becomes more developed. Managing larger communities requires new responsibilities. Encouraging leadership systems that can organize people, resources, and daily activities more effectively. You begin noticing that many of these growing centers share similar features despite being far apart. They maintain storage areas, coordinate collective work, supervise exchanges, and support specialized occupations. Their influence reaches beyond nearby surroundings because neighboring communities rely on them for trade, information, and organization. The foundations of larger political and social structures quietly begin forming. Remarkably, much of this transformation unfolds without relying heavily on advanced metal technology or complex machinery. Successful agriculture, shared cooperation, transportation systems, and growing communication networks become the true foundations of expansion. The ability to connect people, knowledge, and resources often creates greater changes than the ability to produce stronger materials. Human relationships and organized exchange become powerful forces shaping the development of early societies. As generations pass, rivers and coastlines continue drawing communities together. The roots become familiar, expectations develop, alliances form. Economic relationships deepen. What began as isolated settlements linked by occasional contact now resembles something larger and more coordinated. The outlines of early regional powers gradually come into view. When evening settles across the waterways, boats drift gently toward shore while river currents continue their endless movement beneath the fading light. Settlements glow softly in the distance, trade routes remain active, knowledge continues to spread, and across the ancient world, connected communities are slowly acquiring the scale, complexity, and influence that will soon give them the appearance of the earliest empires. You continue your journey along rivers, coastlines, and ancient roads until the landscape begins to reveal something new. The settlements you have followed for centuries are no longer isolated communities connected only by trade. They are becoming parts of larger systems. Across valleys, plains, and hillsides, human cooperation expands beyond villages and towns, creating networks that stretch across entire regions. What emerges is not yet the familiar image of later empires filled with metal weapons and enormous armies. Instead, these early powers are created from soil, water, memory, and careful organization. Their strength grows from fertile fields, irrigation systems, shared traditions, and the combined effort of countless individuals. The foundations of these societies are built through cooperation rather than displays of military dominance. The rivers remain at the heart of this transformation, continuing to nourish crops, support transportation, and sustain expanding populations. Communities that manage water resources successfully gain greater stability and influence over time. Leadership increasingly focuses on organizing labor, protecting infrastructure, and securing dependable harvests. Power grows from the ability to maintain balance rather than relying only on conflict or force. You can observe the evidence scattered throughout the landscape as these systems expand. Irrigation canals stretch farther across cultivated regions, while new fields appear in areas once considered difficult to farm. Reservoirs and embankments help control valuable water supplies. These projects require cooperation beyond individual households or small villages. Entire communities begin working together toward shared goals and long-term stability. Agriculture remains the quiet engine driving this transformation. Larger harvests support larger populations. Larger populations provide more labor. Increased labor allows for ambitious construction projects. The cycle feeds itself gradually, generation after generation. No single moment announces the arrival of a new age. Yet the cumulative effect becomes impossible to ignore across fertile plains. Structures built from packed earth and mud bricks slowly rise above the surrounding fields. Administrative centers appear where community leaders organize storage, coordinate labor, and manage the distribution of resources. These buildings are not created mainly for beauty or display. Their importance comes from their practical purpose, helping larger societies maintain order, cooperation, and stability as populations continue to grow. In some regions, communities transform entire hillsides through carefully planned terraced agriculture. Step-like fields climb slopes that might otherwise remain difficult to farm effectively. These terraces reduce soil erosion, control water movement, and create valuable spaces for cultivation. Seen from far away, they resemble enormous stairways gently rising toward the sky, shaped patiently by generations of human effort. The creation of these large projects reveals remarkable levels of cooperation and organization. Thousands of hours of collective work are invested across many years to complete them. Workers move earth, build supporting walls, guide water, and maintain irrigation channels. These achievements become impressive not because they appear quickly, but because communities continue their efforts steadily over long periods. Archaeologists often view these developments as signs of growing social complexity within early civilizations. Larger communities require systems for planning, communication, and resource management. Certain individuals gradually take responsibility for organizing labor, supervising supplies, and helping resolve disagreements. Governance emerges naturally as populations expand, connections increase, and societies become more closely linked together. One particularly fascinating example appears along the coast of present-day Peru, where the Norte Chico civilization flourishes between approximately 3000 and 1800 BCE. Archaeological discoveries at sites such as Corral reveal massive platform mounds, circular plazas, and organized urban spaces built before widespread metal use. Researchers find evidence of planned communities supported by agriculture, fishing, and cooperation, showing that complex societies could develop through organization rather than advanced weaponry. What makes Norte Chico especially remarkable is the apparent absence of extensive metal technology during its early development. Researchers have found evidence of large ceremonial complexes, platform mounds, and organized settlements, yet clear signs of metal tools remain limited. The civilization demonstrates, once again, that human organization can achieve extraordinary results without relying upon advanced metallurgy. The people of Norte Chico create impressive public spaces and ceremonial centers using materials gathered from their surrounding environment. Their achievements depend on organized labor, successful agriculture, and strong cooperation among communities. Looking at these remains today feels like discovering that an entire civilization was built through patience, planning, and shared effort rather than advanced technology or powerful machinery. As regional centers become more influential, they slowly attract nearby communities and travelers from surrounding areas. Farmers bring extra crops from fertile lands, artisans provide specialized products, and traders carry materials from distant regions. These growing centers become places where people, ideas, and resources meet. Their influence expands gradually, reaching beyond their immediate surroundings. Trade continues to play an important role in strengthening these connections. Goods travel between regions through familiar exchange routes that develop over time. Valuable resources move towards central locations, while crafted objects and agricultural products travel outward in return. These economic relationships create lasting connections that often prove more stable and dependable than simple displays of power. At the same time, shared rituals begin connecting populations separated by distance. Ceremonial gatherings bring different communities together for common experiences. Seasonal events reinforce shared traditions and collective identities. Sacred locations attract visitors from many regions, creating opportunities for interaction. Slowly, these gatherings help people feel connected beyond their own villages, families, and immediate surroundings. Belief systems become meaningful ways for distant communities to maintain relationships. People living far apart may participate in similar ceremonies, respect related traditions, or travel to the same sacred places. Shared spiritual practices encourage cooperation, trust, and understanding. They create cultural foundations that allow larger forms of organization to develop naturally over many generations. The networks that emerge become surprisingly strong and adaptable. Agriculture provides nourishment, trade supports exchange, rituals strengthen relationships, and administration helps coordinate resources. Each part supports the others like pieces of a carefully balanced structure. Together, these systems allow communities to support populations much larger than those found in earlier periods of human history. What you witness is not the sudden appearance of an empire, but a slow and gentle process of connection, adaptation, and growth. Step by step, field by field, and settlement by settlement, communities become linked through shared needs and experiences. The transformation resembles a river gathering many small streams into one steady current. No single stream creates the river, yet together they become something larger and more powerful. As twilight settles over the plains and terraced hillsides, workers return from fields nourished by carefully managed water. Traders arrive at administrative centers carrying goods from distant regions. Ceremonial fires glow softly near gathering places where people share traditions older than memory. Across these interconnected landscapes, lands once separated by distance are gradually woven together through agriculture, commerce, ritual, and belief, forming the quiet foundations of the earliest earth-built empires. You continue along the expanding pathways of the ancient world, but the changes you encounter now are quieter than new buildings or growing populations. They unfold within conversations, customs, and daily habits. As larger regions become connected through trade, agriculture, administration, and ritual, people begin meeting others whose languages, traditions, and beliefs differ from their own. At first, these cultural differences seem clear and easy to notice. A traveler arriving from a distant valley may wear unfamiliar clothing, carry different tools, or speak with another rhythm of speech. Farmers from nearby regions may grow crops using unique methods shaped by local conditions. Craftspeople may create pottery decorated with patterns unknown to others. Yet slowly, curiosity and communication often become stronger than separation. The process of cultural adaptation rarely happens suddenly or through one major event. It develops gradually, resembling a river carrying fine sediment downstream over countless years. Each tiny grain appears insignificant, yet together they reshape entire landscapes. In the same way, small exchanges between communities slowly transform societies, creating new traditions without any single moment marking the beginning. You can observe this process clearly in ancient marketplaces where many communities gather. Traders arrive with goods from distant territories, but they also bring stories, techniques, and ideas. A skill learned in one settlement may later appear elsewhere. A decorative pattern may influence local artists. New customs spread naturally through observation, conversation, and imitation, rather than through force or instruction. Languages themselves begin changing as societies become more connected. Words borrowed from neighboring groups enter everyday speech and become familiar expressions. Terms related to farming, trade, rituals, and craftsmanship travel across surprising distances. Linguists studying ancient cultures often discover evidence of these exchanges preserved in old vocabularies, revealing relationships that might otherwise remain hidden from view. In growing regional systems, practical cooperation encourages people to adapt and understand each other. Administrators managing larger populations must communicate across cultural boundaries. Merchants gain advantages when they understand different languages and customs. Community leaders search for ways to maintain balance among diverse groups. Flexibility becomes a valuable ability, helping societies operate smoothly as their connections continue expanding. Meanwhile, families continue their ordinary routines within these changing cultural landscapes. Children grow up surrounded by different traditions, languages, and customs from nearby communities. They inherit practices from their ancestors while also discovering new ideas through trade, travel, and daily interactions. For them, adaptation feels natural rather than surprising. These gradual influences quietly shape their identities and the future generations that follow. Architecture provides some of the clearest signs of cultural blending throughout ancient societies. Builders often learn techniques from neighboring regions and combine them with their own local traditions. A single structure may include construction methods developed elsewhere while still preserving familiar styles. These buildings become lasting records of human interaction, with stories of exchange preserved in stone, earth, clay, and timber. Religious life changes through similar patterns as communities remain connected over long periods. Sacred symbols, ceremonies, and artistic designs often absorb influences from different groups. Historians have discovered many examples where traditions once viewed as separate gradually merge into more complex belief systems. These changes reveal how ideas move slowly across generations, carried by travel, trade, and shared experiences. One lesser-known historical reality is that many ancient religious symbols emerged through centuries of cultural interaction rather than appearing as sudden inventions. These designs travel across regions with merchants, explorers, pilgrims, and migrating communities. Over many generations, different societies reinterpret the symbols according to their own beliefs, experiences, and traditions. The final forms often preserve contributions from many groups. Connected through long histories of exchange, adaptation, and shared human creativity, the same pattern appears in monumental architecture throughout the ancient world. A temple, ceremonial platform, or gathering place may include features inspired by several cultural traditions. Builders adjust designs to match local environments while preserving useful ideas learned from elsewhere. Innovation often emerges through combination and adaptation, showing how creativity grows when communities remain connected rather than isolated. If you could walk through one of these ancient centers, you would notice many details showing the blending of different cultures. Decorative patterns from distant regions appear beside local designs. Building methods combine several influences, while different languages can be heard in shared spaces. The entire environment quietly reflects centuries of interaction, where communities exchange ideas and gradually shape a broader cultural landscape together. What makes this process so fascinating is its slow and natural development over many generations. People rarely create a completely new culture overnight. Instead, change accumulates through countless everyday interactions. A trader shares a story, a traveler introduces a technique, or a family adopts a useful custom. These small adjustments gradually become familiar traditions that communities pass forward through time. Researchers often compare cultural exchange to the harmony found within natural ecosystems. Different plants can grow together in one balanced environment, and diverse traditions can coexist inside expanding societies. Strong communities often develop by accepting useful influences instead of rejecting differences. Variety becomes a valuable source of resilience, helping civilizations remain adaptable as they encounter new challenges, changing conditions, and unfamiliar ideas. Trade routes continue strengthening cultural connections across distant regions as communities exchange resources and experiences. Goods travel between settlements with increasing regularity, yet every journey also creates opportunities for conversation and learning. Ideas move alongside materials, while knowledge follows the same routes as commerce. Human relationships become equally important as traded objects, creating lasting bonds between populations separated by vast landscapes. Rivers, deserts, and mountains, across many generations, differences that once seemed obvious gradually become less distant and more interconnected. Communities preserve their own identities while joining wider cultural networks through trade and shared experiences. Common ceremonies emerge, artistic styles travel, and familiar symbols appear across faraway regions. People begin to recognize connections beyond their own villages, creating a larger feeling of belonging that reaches across landscapes and generations. This does not mean that every cultural difference disappears completely over time. Ancient societies remain diverse, with local traditions, regional customs, and unique practices continuing to exist. However, these individual elements increasingly become part of broader systems of cooperation and exchange. The result is not complete sameness, but a world where different communities learn to live alongside one another. As evening settles across the interconnected world, voices from many traditions mingle beneath the same sky. Merchants return from distant journeys. Families gather within homes shaped by blended influences. Ceremonial songs carry echoes of multiple generations and cultures. Like layers of fertile silt slowly accumulating along a riverbank, countless exchanges have settled into the foundations of daily life. What once seemed separate now contributes to a broader identity, one large enough to embrace many histories while continuing its quiet journey through time. You continue your journey through the ancient world, following the networks of rivers, roads, coastlines, and traditions that have connected so many communities across the centuries. Yet as time moves forward, you begin noticing another pattern within the landscape. Some places continue growing, while others gradually grow quieter. The change feels gentle, like a river slowly choosing a different channel rather than a sudden interruption. History often remembers the rise of cities, but it is equally shaped by their periods of rest. No settlement remains at the center of attention forever. The same natural forces that once supported growth continue changing over time. Rainfall shifts, rivers alter their courses, trade routes evolve, populations move toward new opportunities. The landscape itself participates in the ongoing story. You stand upon a quiet hillside overlooking a settlement that was once filled with activity. The fields remain visible, yet fewer people now work the soil. Some homes still hold families, while others slowly blend back into the earth. Nothing changes through one sudden moment. Instead, countless small adjustments accumulate over generations, gently reshaping the character of the community. Climate plays an important role in these slow transformations across ancient societies. Communities depend greatly on stable environmental patterns for agriculture, water supplies, and everyday survival. When rainfall shifts or dry periods become longer, farming systems face increasing difficulties. People adapt whenever possible, but adaptation may require relocating, reorganizing resources, changing traditions, or allowing populations to gradually become smaller as conditions continue to change. Researchers studying ancient climates often examine natural records such as lake sediments, pollen deposits, and tree rings preserved through time. These sources reveal how environments gradually become wetter or drier across many centuries. Climate changes rarely appear as sudden events that completely transform a society overnight. Instead, they develop slowly, influencing farming methods, settlement choices, resource planning, and the everyday decisions of countless generations. Trade networks also shape the changing fortunes of ancient settlements in quiet ways. A community may become prosperous because it stands along an important route connecting distant regions. However, when new pathways appear, merchants naturally follow easier and more efficient journeys. As trade slowly moves elsewhere, the settlement may lose influence and become calmer. The transition happens through shifting connections rather than any single dramatic moment. You can compare this process to a modern town that grows beside a busy highway until another road attracts most travelers. The buildings remain standing, the landscape remains familiar, and many residents continue their routines. Yet the movement that once created constant energy gradually changes direction. History often transforms through slow redirection and adaptation, much like a river changing its course after many seasons. Population movement follows similar patterns throughout ancient landscapes as communities respond to changing conditions. Families may relocate toward areas with richer resources, stronger water supplies, or better opportunities. Farmers search for dependable land, while traders establish new centers near expanding markets. Each decision seems ordinary when viewed alone, but together, these countless choices slowly reshape regions and create new patterns of human settlement. Archaeological evidence often reveals these quiet and gradual transitions across ancient settlements. Layers of habitation become less dense over time, while fewer buildings receive repairs and public areas experience reduced activity. Some neighborhoods slowly become empty as others continue functioning. The process feels like evening light fading across the horizon, gentle and gradual, rather than a sudden disappearance that leaves everything unchanged. One fascinating example comes from the ancient Maya civilization, where many cities experienced long periods of transformation. Earlier interpretations suggested that Maya urban centers vanished suddenly, but modern research presents a more detailed picture. Many cities gradually decline over generations due to environmental pressures, changing resources, political shifts, and movements of population rather than one single dramatic event. Cities such as Tikal and other Maya centers continue changing through complicated patterns of adaptation. Environmental conditions, political relationships, and trade connections influence how communities organize themselves. Some areas become quieter, while others remain active for longer periods. People adjust, relocate, and rebuild their lives elsewhere, showing that history often follows a path of transformation instead of simple endings. The monumental structures remain in place long after many inhabitants leave. Temples continue standing above forests, while plazas receive sunlight and seasonal rain. Stone pathways and stairways endure even when fewer footsteps cross them. These ancient constructions become silent witnesses, preserving memories of societies whose priorities and daily rhythms gradually changed across many generations. Nature slowly becomes part of these abandoned spaces as the passing years continue quietly forward. Plants emerge between ancient stones, birds create nests within forgotten corners, and gentle winds carry seeds into empty areas. The surrounding environment does not erase human achievements immediately. Instead, it gradually blends old structures with living ecosystems, allowing the remains of past civilizations to become peaceful parts of the wider natural landscape. Even places that lose their original importance can continue holding meaning in different forms. Former urban centers may remain as cultural landmarks, sacred locations, or reminders of shared memories. People may still visit these places for ceremonies, reflection, or connection with the past. A settlement does not lose its value simply because its earlier purpose changes through the slow movement of time. Meanwhile, life continues in new regions where communities discover more suitable opportunities and resources. People build settlements near reliable water, active trade routes, and favorable environments. They carry traditions, agricultural knowledge, and practical skills with them. Human creativity remains adaptable and mobile, allowing societies to change while preserving the experiences and lessons passed down from previous generations. These transitions resemble the natural cycles found throughout the world around us. Rivers slowly shift their courses, forests expand and retreat, and landscapes continue transforming through time. Human communities follow similar patterns of growth, adjustment, and renewal. Expansion eventually creates the need for change, while change often produces new forms of stability that appear quietly in unexpected places. People living through these transformations rarely recognize them as the closing of a great historical chapter. Instead, they focus on ordinary matters such as families, harvests, resources, and daily responsibilities. History may seem dramatic when viewed from many centuries later, yet those experiencing it usually encounter only small changes. Life continues through simple decisions, repeated routines, and quiet adjustments made season after season. As twilight settles across ancient plazas and quiet fields, the great structures remain silhouetted against the fading sky. Their stones hold memories of gatherings, ceremonies, markets, and generations of human effort. Though some centers now rest in relative silence, countless communities continue thriving elsewhere. Rivers still flow, roads still carry travelers, and new settlements continue appearing beyond the horizon. The story moves onward, not through endings, but through gentle transitions that carry life into its next chapter. You continue your journey beyond the quiet plazas and resting monuments of former centers, following the flow of time itself. The cities that once guided trade, organized harvests, and gathered thousands of people no longer occupy the same positions they once held, yet their influence has not disappeared. Instead, it lingers in subtle ways, carried forward through memory, knowledge, and the enduring habits of human societies. History rarely begins from a completely empty foundation. Each generation inherits knowledge, skills, and traditions from those who came before. A farming practice, a building method, an old story, or a meaningful ritual can continue even after the original society transforms. Human civilization moves like a flowing river, gathering countless small streams along the way, with every contribution helping shape the greater journey of humanity across time. As new settlements appear across different regions, they often grow upon older foundations already created by previous societies. Farmers continue raising familiar crops, builders improve existing techniques, and leaders preserve useful methods of organization. Even when governments and cultures transform, practical knowledge often remains strong. The experiences of one community quietly become the foundation. Supporting another generation, you can imagine a group of builders standing beside a new construction project many years after an earlier settlement has faded away. They may never know the names of the original creators, yet they continue applying techniques refined through countless generations. Knowledge survives because it proves valuable and reliable. Practical wisdom often travels beyond the lives of those who first discovered and developed these remarkable methods. Beneath the ground, traces of earlier worlds remain quietly hidden for centuries. Layers of soil slowly cover abandoned homes, workshops, storage areas, and ceremonial spaces. Wind carries dust across empty places, while floods leave behind fresh deposits of earth. Plants grow, decay, and return to the ground. Over time, nature preserves human activity beneath a peaceful covering of history. For many generations, these buried places remain untouched and silent. Centuries pass while new kingdoms rise, old powers disappear, and distant societies transform. Roads shift, languages change, and populations move across wide landscapes. Yet beneath forests, deserts, plains, and fields, countless objects continue waiting. The ancient world does not truly vanish. It simply becomes quieter beneath the surface. Archaeologists often describe excavation as a conversation with the distant past. Each layer of soil reveals evidence from a particular period in history. Pottery fragments, tools, beads, food remains, and building foundations provide clues about forgotten lives. Every discovered object represents a small moment that has survived far beyond its original purpose, patiently carrying memories across thousands of years. A simple clay vessel can reveal surprisingly detailed stories about ancient communities. It may show what people ate, how they traded, what designs they valued, and how they produced everyday items. To its original owner, the vessel was probably only a common household object. Yet after centuries pass, it becomes a quiet messenger connecting the present with a distant human experience. The same idea applies to ancient tools and personal objects. Stone blades, wooden items preserved under special conditions, and carefully created ornaments often survive long enough to reach future researchers. Archaeologists combine these fragments to rebuild forgotten histories. Sometimes a small broken artifact can reveal more about daily life than a large monument standing above the landscape. One fascinating reality is that many ancient construction techniques never completely vanish from human history. Methods using rammed earth, mud brick, and compressed soil continue appearing in different regions even today. Builders still understand the practical value of these materials, which have supported communities for thousands of years. Their continued use quietly reminds us that some ancient solutions remain effective despite the arrival of newer technologies. Rammed earth construction creates durable walls by pressing layers of soil together until they become firm and stable. This method appears in many ancient societies and remains useful in modern sustainable building practices. It offers a gentle reminder that innovation is not always about replacing older ideas. Sometimes progress comes from understanding why certain methods survive and adapting them for new circumstances. Walking through modern villages in some parts of the world, you may still discover buildings created with techniques closely connected to ancient traditions. The tools may have changed and the environment may be different, yet the basic principles remain familiar. Time often preserves what works well, allowing practical knowledge to continue quietly through generations of builders and communities. Meanwhile, researchers continue discovering hidden connections between civilizations separated by centuries and distant landscapes. A decorative design appears again in another culture. A farming technique survives through gradual adaptation. A settlement grows near the remains of an older community. These discoveries reveal that human societies are often connected by invisible threads stronger than they first appear. Civilizations rarely vanish completely from human history. Their knowledge continues flowing into later societies through migration, trade, learning, and shared memories. Names may slowly disappear, but valuable contributions remain within daily habits and cultural traditions. Ancient ideas continue quietly through generations, carried by people who may not realize they are preserving wisdom created by communities that existed thousands of years before their own time. The empires and regional powers explored throughout this journey gradually become part of a much larger human story. Later societies inherit landscapes shaped by earlier generations, including roads, fields, waterways, customs, and accumulated knowledge. History moves forward like a gentle river, carrying traces of past civilizations along its current, rather than completely erasing everything they once created. In some regions, ancient ruins remain visible beneath the open sky, standing quietly across the landscape like reminders from distant ages. Elsewhere, entire settlements rest beneath layers of soil, patiently waiting for future exploration. Both forms of preservation carry meaning. Visible structures awaken curiosity, while buried remains protect forgotten stories that may reveal more about human creativity, resilience, and adaptation. The passage of time continues its slow and patient journey across the earth. Winds reshape deserts, rivers gradually alter their courses, and forests slowly cover abandoned places. Yet traces of human activity remain within these changing environments. The planet itself becomes a vast archive, preserving memories of communities that built, adapted, and experienced countless transformations throughout the long story of humanity. As evening settles once again across the ancient world, you stand between memory and possibility. Behind you lie the fields, rivers, trade routes, and communities that shaped early civilizations. Ahead lie generations yet to come, each inheriting something from those before them. Beneath the earth, forgotten artifacts rest quietly in darkness, waiting for distant hands to uncover them. And as the centuries continue flowing onward, the mighty powers of the past become part of a longer human story, one whose echoes remain present beneath every new horizon. You have traveled beside rivers older than human memory, crossed valleys shaped by countless seasons, and watched communities transform into centers of influence before slowly giving their place to others. Now, as this vast journey approaches its final moments, your attention gradually rises beyond ordinary human history. The story becomes much larger, calmer, and slower, following the endless rhythm of time itself. The rivers remain below, still winding through plains and fertile deltas as they have for many thousands of years. Yet even these waterways are temporary features within the greater landscape of the earth. Given enough time, rivers change their courses, deepen their valleys, or disappear beneath new environments. What seems eternal during human existence becomes surprisingly brief in geological time. You begin gazing toward distant mountains beneath the fading evening sky. Their peaks seem timeless, silent, and permanent. Yet geology reveals a different reality. Mountains rise through powerful forces deep within the earth, slowly pushing upward over immense periods. At the same time, wind, rain, frost, and rivers gradually wear them down, reshaping them grain by grain through endless natural processes. This transformation happens so slowly that no single human lifetime can witness it completely. Entire civilizations emerge, flourish, and disappear, while a mountain range changes only slightly. Empires once considered enormous and powerful become brief moments within the vast story written across stone, minerals, and layers of ancient sediment throughout the long history of the planet. Throughout this journey, you have discovered communities that achieved remarkable progress without relying heavily on metal technology. They created settlements, controlled waterways, developed trade systems, and connected distant populations through cooperation. Their achievements were extraordinary, yet when viewed across geological time, even these impressive accomplishments resemble gentle ripples moving across the surface of a vast and endless river of history. The same pattern appears in every form of human power throughout history. Kingdoms rise, governments expand, trade networks strengthen, and new leaders eventually replace old ones. Over time, circumstances change, and another generation inherits the world before them. New systems emerge from earlier experiences. Human history continues flowing forward like a river, following its natural path toward the distant sea. This understanding does not diminish the importance of ancient civilizations. Instead, it places their achievements within a much broader view of human history. Their stories reveal how communities adapted, cooperated, created, and endured through changing environments. Their greatest legacy was never permanent power or unlimited control, but the knowledge, traditions, and innovations they passed onward to future generations of humanity. Beneath your feet, the earth quietly preserves evidence of countless transformations that shaped ancient landscapes over time. Layers of sediment slowly build across centuries and millennia. Dust settles, rivers deposit fine particles, and organic materials become covered beneath newer layers. Each deposit becomes part of a vast natural archive, recording traces of human activity and environmental changes beyond ordinary memory. Scientists study these layers to understand worlds that existed before written records were created. Sediments reveal ancient climates, shifting rivers, and changing ecosystems across long periods. Tiny pollen fragments preserved in soil can show which plants once grew in distant regions. The earth remembers through natural processes, offering clues about the past in ways that written history cannot always provide. Trees preserve another remarkable form of natural memory through their annual growth rings. Each ring reflects conditions experienced during a particular year. Rainfall, temperature, and environmental changes influence the patterns formed within the wood. Long after ancient communities disappear, trees continue carrying evidence of earlier centuries, quietly recording seasons that passed before modern observation and scientific study existed. This scientific reality provides a deeper way to understand the distant past. Even when rulers, traders, builders, and farmers are no longer remembered, traces of their lives remain within natural records. Sediment layers, tree rings, ice cores, and geological formations preserve fragments of earlier worlds. These quiet archives connect separated generations and reveal stories that written documents may have failed to record. You may notice how different this form of memory feels compared with traditional historical accounts. Human records often emphasize powerful leaders, battles, and impressive monuments. Natural archives preserve wider experiences, including floods, droughts, climate changes, and shifting landscapes. They reveal the conditions that shaped communities, showing that every civilization existed within a larger rhythm of the natural world. The civilizations that developed beside the Nile, Indus, Yellow River, and other ancient waterways become part of this endless continuation. Their canals slowly disappear beneath sediment, buildings gradually weaken, and pathways fade into surrounding landscapes. Yet their influence survives through descendants, traditions, knowledge, and adaptations carried forward by generations. Their presence remains woven into the long story of human civilization. Even the greatest structures buried beneath the ground remain connected to the present world. Their materials slowly return to nature, while their stories continue inspiring researchers and curious minds. Discoveries from these places expand human understanding and reveal forgotten achievements. Nothing completely disappears. Instead, everything becomes part of a wider cycle of transformation. Now the journey begins slowing gently, allowing the details of ancient cities, settlements, and pathways to gradually fade into the distance. The names of forgotten places become less important than the rivers that once sustained them. The rivers become less important than the landscapes surrounding them. Finally, everything merges peacefully into the quiet movement of the earth itself, continuing through endless cycles of time. You imagine a vast ancient plain beneath a quiet evening sky extending beyond the distant horizon. A river flows gently through reeds and grasses, while faraway mountains rest beneath the fading light of sunset. The air feels cool, peaceful, and still. There is no urgency, no pressure, and no unfinished task waiting nearby. Only silence remains across this timeless landscape, inviting the mind to slowly rest. The water continues flowing exactly as it has for countless ages before. It passes forgotten villages, buried foundations, ancient fields, and sleeping landscapes shaped by generations long gone. Gentle winds move softly across the open plain. Reeds sway beside the riverbank, creating quiet movements in the darkness. The sounds are small, distant, and almost invisible, yet they remain steady, peaceful, and comforting. And as the darkness deepens, the story itself becomes quieter. The empires without metal, the builders of earth and water, the traders, farmers, artisans, and storytellers all settle into the long current of time. Their journeys become part of a river that never truly ends. Far away, you can almost hear the distant sound of water moving through an ancient channel, accompanied by the soft whisper of wind crossing an endless plain. The sounds grow fainter, the spaces between them grow longer, and the world drifts gently toward stillness. The script comes to a close. Thank you all for listening.